when you do anything fast and to scale, it's not going to be the same quality as when you do it more methodically and you don't have that scale issue pressuring you. So give me any building, built in the 20s and even early 30s, and those buildings were built rock solid, over-engineered structures. And as long as they're sized appropriately and where you need them and so forth, they're great. If you can gut them in the insides. Mm-hmm. Give me any building built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and those buildings had a 50-year life. Your 1920s buildings had a 100-year life cycle in them. 50s, 60s, 70s, 50-year, provided you do that 2% annual investment in its maintenance and operations, which nobody did.
Hey, David, hold on one second.
Yeah.
We're about to be able to go live TV-wise, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we might be answering some of those or asking some of those same questions again, just because they were so very good. Okay. Nicole, speaking of yours about the XYZ, I do think that you should ask that question, and so that you'll be able to answer that.
No problem.
I know.
We've got it rehearsed now.
I didn't know what we were doing.
Well, it was one of those questions, though, that we all kind of went,
and also the money.
How is it being funded? What's the mix on that?
Because that's the main question is, how are you going to pay for this?
Right.
And we do have a lot of questions rolling in too, so I do.
And I'm going to assume that your
also,
answer is going to be the tax
can we prevent this from happening again? Would this amount of money help do that?
So I think that 2%.
Okay, so here we are live. For those of you who are just joining us on TV, we have been talking live on Facebook, and I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of who is here for our open roundtable. And remember, this is your chance to be able to ask questions on our Facebook page right now that you can get answered within the next 30 minutes. So right to my left, of course, is Dr. Sharon Contreras with Guilford County Schools. Angie Henry, the CFO of Guilford County Schools. David Sturts, the Cooperative Strategies, who actually did this master plan. Then we have Carol Hilbert. She is the principal of Southern Guilford Elementary. We have two parents joining us here on this roundtable. Nicole Higgins is our first parent. Jack Baker is our second parent. And then, of course, WFMY News 2's Jess Winters, who has been covering this since this master plan was announced. She is the one who's taking your questions on Facebook and then making sure that we are able to have that discussion here. We have been discussing again for the last 15, 20 minutes or so. And Nicole, I kind of wanted to start with you because you had one of those questions that really made us all go, okay, yes, that is what people are asking about.
Okay, so I guess, and to be fair to David too, because him and I have had, it was essentially how did it get this bad?
Right.
And that was kind of how we kind of kicked this off.
How we get here.
And then the second question was, are you providing the Guilford County voters with an itemized breakdown of why this building's getting closed, why this school's getting done, why this is this, basically the XYZ of how you came to the conclusion of this master plan?
Yes, and I can answer both questions in sequence there. So first, how did we get here? We got here because most of your buildings are cresting 60 years old, and because of their era of construction, 50s, 60s, 70s, they're at or beyond the end of their useful life, many of them. That life cycle assumes that you're spending a certain amount to keep them up every year. And that industry standard is about 2% of its replacement value at the time of construction, which you didn't do, which almost no district has done across. Some have, but most have not across the country, rather.
Right, and you did go across the country,
right, because it's a national issue. Most of the buildings in the country were built in 1955. They were all built in that same era with that 50-year life cycle. They weren't built for the ages. They weren't built for 100 years like we built them in the 20s or 100 years like we're building them now. They were built for the baby boom, so they were built quick, and they assumed a level of maintenance that nobody did because of recessions and budgets, and we cut those, and we took the money out of the building maintenance, and we gave it to the operations and the people because, yeah, you prioritize your people, but the buildings eventually catch up with you. That's where you're a large district.
Very large.
You're a very large district, and when 800 million deferred maintenance, given the the life of your buildings, the average life of your building, the average age is no surprise.
Hey, David, can I interrupt you
Yes.
for just a second? Because Dr. Contreras brought up a major point about the maintenance, what it is, what it costs, and what you get, and how that also applies to other districts.
Yeah, so we receive about 42 cents per square foot. We have about 13 million square feet of property here, of school buildings. And it's simply not enough to maintain the school. So people often come to us and say, why aren't you doing something about the heat, or we don't have air conditioning, or the roof is leaking, the windows are leaking? And I can tell you, no superintendent, no Board of Education desires for children to be in substandard buildings anywhere in this country. We simply do not have the funding to maintain this. And the problem has just grown year after year. It's just compounded until we're at the point where we have $800 million in deferred maintenance. So we all know what it's like when we need a new roof for our homes, or, I just bought a new heating system in my home, and, that was $9,000. So in a school, like we just replaced one at the academy at Lincoln, it was $4.5 million. It took us 3 years to pay for it because we only receive about $6 million a year for all 125 schools. We have to do better at the state level and at the federal level. We need an infrastructure bill at the federal level, and we need a state funding formula that includes funding for schools at the local level, so it doesn't all fall to the counties to maintain buildings.
And we're getting a ton of questions on Facebook, so I really want to address these. Now, this is one of the #1 questions I personally have gotten, and I'm going to address this to Dr. Sharon Contreras. A lot of people are saying, well, what about the raises for custodians? What about the raises, when we were covering bus drivers a couple weeks ago? This is 2 separate funds. How are we talking about $2 billion when we can't give our people raises? That's been a #1 question.
Absolutely. So I will ask our CFO to explain how funding works in the state of North Carolina, and you cannot use these funds interchangeably.
Sure, right. So in North Carolina, we have, lots of school districts have general funds, and that's where they pay for the day-to-day operations. That's where they pay for salaries, all the things you need to operate a school district every day. That's where we pay the salaries for our custodians, for our maintenance staff, for our teacher assistants. All that comes from our general fund. And the county does appropriate dollars for that funding. But the county also appropriates dollars for capital funding. You can't mix those two. So when we have dollars for capital funding, we can't use that to pay the operational cost of the day-to-day expenses of running the school district. Those have to be used in facilities, on facilities.
Yeah, that's a good explainer there so that people can know that. All right, right now what we want to do is we want to take you inside the schools. Just recently, Jess Winters was able to get some pictures from inside various Guilford County schools so you can see the needs that we're talking about. Okay, so right now we have 2 minutes where we're not on TV, but we are on Facebook.
Okay.
So that we are able
I'm
to
going
do
to
that.
press on live the second half of that question.
I actually have, when you said that 2% maintenance,
Right.
but do you have that scheduled, or is that scheduled? Do you have that budgeted, or is that something that the state? But who's responsible for maintaining that? Who's responsible? I guess who's responsible for making sure that's happening?
So 2% is the standard.
It's the standard.
The business standard that by statute falls to the Board of County Commissioners. It's not happening here. That's 2% of the.
So the county commissioners aren't going to budget that well, after you do this big haul, let's say you get your $2 billion, and after you do this big haul, do the county commissioners plan on adding on some form of maintenance fee to?
That's up to us as the residents of Guilford County to make sure that that is included in all budgets. Now, I don't know any district that budgets at 2%. but I think we can certainly do better than $6 million.
It's an order of magnitude larger if you were to even get close to that. We're talking 10 times.
I'm sure. I just want to make sure
that's
that
what I was thinking.
I just want to make sure that my kid's not sitting here 20 years down the road having this same conversation because that was not
For 10 seconds,
done.
we're back
And her
live on
going,
air.
man, they're asking me for $2 billion more. My mom just sat
I
there.
sure
Yeah.
do.
Okay, great.
That's not fair to them. I don't want to put any more burdens of debt
All
onto
right,
my
so
kids.
we're going to be getting back to your question right now because we have another Facebook question that we'd like to use.
Yes, Stephanie Mitchell is asking, how many new schools can you build per year? 3? In that case, it's going to take forever. And now I do want to give some context that we're rebuilding 22 schools. Not all of them.
Right.
22, that's part of the proposal.
Correct.
19 fully renovated,
Right.
priority repairs for 56.
Right.
But people are saying this is going to take too long, my kids won't be affected. What's happening?
And there is a timeline of sorts.
There's a timeline of sorts. I mean, a couple ways I can jump in and you can finish it.
And please jump in. So it depends on how we budget this, the phasing. So we can budget it in one phase. There are school districts that rebuilt all of their schools in one phase. Greenville, South Carolina, rebuilt 70 schools in 6 years.
Whoa.
That also depends on, do we have the capacity to have contractors, construction workers? Can we get them to North Carolina? How much construction is happening in the state, across the country? It could happen in 2 phases, 3 phases. I don't think anyone would ever recommend doing this more than 3 phases, or you get back into that deferred maintenance problem again.
Right.
So
Your plan was 3 phases, each
5
phase
years.
3 to 5,
Two-
3
yeah,
to 5
no,
years.
The current recommendations is two phases. As Dr. Contreras said, wouldn't recommend going beyond 3 if you had to pare that down even further, so that you're looking at a 10 to 15 year horizon to address all of the needs.
My concern is, are there enough construction crews available to do that?
Yeah, that's-
Because
who's gonna do that?
between, according to the UN, and between Charlotte and Raleigh over the next 10 years, they're increasing 5 million people each.
Right.
They've got to live somewhere. If you ever lived anywhere where traveling more than an hour's not outside the normal, like I have, here traveling an hour's not a big. You're spending the night somewhere. Anywhere else, hours not. We're in between.
Sure.
Are we going to be able to do the school construction with enough people, and be able to keep up with that residential growth
Sure.
to make that happen?
Yeah.
Do we have enough of those, or is that going to be
Correct.
the ability to do that? Have we thought about taking our schools and putting in like an apprenticeship program to help alleviate that? Because right now, the way the construction industry is, our biggest problem is finding qualified people.
I'll tell you this, from a nationally speaking, when I do this work around the country, it has been a drumbeat of we need skilled labor.
Yes.
Career tech education is having a renaissance because the demand for those jobs are so high. And it's not just here, it's everywhere. And so this is in part an opportunity. It is something of a chicken and the egg, right? But you gotta start. And providing those highly skilled career tech programs at the high school level, it helps you downstream. But as far as right now, that's in part why when we look at the phasing, we've got to address what's the highest need now, and then phase those out in yearly chunks, because it can't all hit at once.
And
Yeah.
the
Right.
the other question too that had been brought up by parents was, how is this going to play out with my kids in different schools or when construction is happening? How do we make that work the best way?
Yeah.
How do you make it the least disruptive
The least
on the
disruptive
student?
option,
On the
right.
student.
On the student. And the way that you do that is, it's called swing space. Where do you swing kids during construction? And the ideal solution for that is that kids stay where they are. That's the least disruptive. And you do that in areas like the plan for here at Page, is you can flip the site, which means you build the new building on where fields currently exist while school's going on, and then once the new construction is done, the kids move in and the old area that was a building is knocked down and that becomes fields. That is the least disruptive option. And we have that planned when we think is feasible. Beyond that, you look at swing spaces Another option on swing space is swing space to temporary buildings on the site. Emphasis on temporary. This is not up here for 20 years. This is up here for 2 during construction and then gone, right? Or in the sort of the third and last option is we don't have enough room to rebuild on site. We need to rebuild on site. We don't have enough room to rebuild and have the kids there, so you look at swinging them off site. And when you swing them off site, if that's needed, you look at backing up. Where can we get them into new facilities? And so when they are moving out is a trade up scenario for them before they can move back to their new building.
So then that would say, now when you talk about that, if you have to take the third option and let's say you got to do it and you got to
Right.
bus kids out, do you have a plan for both the buses and the bus routes? The inconvenience it might be an inconvenience if my kids got to go to school a half hour away from my home district. How do you
Yeah,
plan
you
on
don't do
addressing the inconvenience that it could put on parents having to bus them, 2 different locations, and do you have a plan for that?
We will have to have a plan for that.
But you don't have
once
one
we
yet.
Well, because we don't know where the swing space will
What
be
to
yet.
do.
So I
Yeah,
can,
once
I can
we
tell
know
you
where
this.
the swing space is, we will have to develop the plan for transportation accordingly. But I think we all have to plan for some disruption, knowing in the end we will have some of the best school facilities in the country and a community where businesses will want to come to and establish themselves, where we'll have more mixed income communities and more middle class families coming to the region. We're starting to see that the community is becoming poorer and more and more poor. That's a problem for us. And people choose communities by the schools very often. We'll see housing values going up, crime going down as a result of this. So yes, there will be inconveniences. We'll try to minimize that, but we will eventually benefit from the new facilities. And to your question, Jack, about are we doing anything to ensure that perhaps the schools have career pathways to help with the construction? Actually, the plan is that High Point Central will have green construction and skilled trades be renovated to include that, along with Smith High School. And all of the high schools will have signature academies included for the different career pathways that are growth fields in the region, in the state, including computer sciences, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. We have looked at that triad study, and we are looking to make sure that our students graduate with meaningful degrees or diplomas, credentials, and can get jobs.
All right, so speaking of that, we now want to transition to how this plan is actually going to touch every single school that's out there. Take a look at this. So this story that is playing right now talks about the different pieces of technology that will be incorporated, safety standards as well that will be incorporated.
That's a huge concern I hear from parents.
Yes.
So I mean, down at Northern Elementary, we go in. You have to press a button to go in and all that stuff, and
Yeah, but
the
we
door's
do
locked,
too.
which is great. But I mean, we could probably.
Do better.
Yeah, I know we can.
That was one of the
Reality-
first things I noticed here, that in the newest building I walked in, it did not have an integrated security system. They didn't have integrated
I'm gonna come back
security
with a question.
technologies where we could communicate.
Is that what you were going to say?
Continue?
Oh, yeah, keep going. I'm sorry. I was just speaking to Tanya.
Sorry.
I'm trying to be subtle, but
They did not have integrated security technologies that allowed us to quickly communicate with law enforcement, fire, and this is of the utmost importance. I am a parent of a student in the school district. I want to know if there's an emergency that immediately staff can reach, or students can reach law enforcement, and they're not trying to do it with their cell phones and they're in dead spots all over the building. So
something I'm
every
really
single
concerned
school
about.
building, even the newest school buildings, will be touched again to make sure that we upgrade the safety components of the building, and that we upgrade every building so that they have state-of-the-art technology as well. So this is not a plan or the type of plans we've seen in the past where there are winners and losers. all buildings except the early and middle colleges, which are not on our they're not our campuses, those are on the universities, will be touched in some way.
Okay. How about, I know parents, and so.
Folks, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, we're back live on TV, and I really want to take some questions from social media because you wouldn't believe how many questions we're getting right now, and a lot of it has to do with money.
Yep.
So one question we have here, the schools that you are proposing to close, and you're proposing to close 13, why can't they be sold so GCS has some money? And I'm guessing it has to do with condition.
It depends. Some of them can. So when you look at closures, there's closure and repurpose the site, okay, for another purpose, an educational purpose, right? So like Archer Elementary School becomes a Montessori environment. That is closing the program, keeping the site. Then there's closing the site itself and surplusing it, like say in Madison, right, where you look at the area capacity, you don't need it. In that area, you could potentially look at that. That's the main driving force behind the administration option, which is you are spread out in all of these buildings, and like good adults, your buildings are in the worst condition for your admin, relatively speaking, even compared to the schools. And they're spread out. So the plan is to consolidate those in far fewer buildings, and you can have 10, 11 surplus sites that you could sell, you could monetize.
But I do want to remind the public, because I think the public thinks these schools are in good condition. It's like your automobile, and I want to remind them about our schools impacted by the tornado. The community was so disheartened that we got hit by the tornado, but then they got excited. We're going to get new schools. Well, we got a few $1 million for those buildings because the schools were in bad condition. It's just like your car. If you're in an accident, if you have a Cadillac, you're going to get a lot of money for that car to replace it. But if you have, a 1989 Toyota Corolla, you're not going to get as much as you would for a 2019 Cadillac. So don't expect that you're going to get a lot of money for those school buildings.
We have just a few minutes left. Is there another question there, or
yeah,
is there
absolutely.
one?
I just want to bring up some context too. When $2 billion sounds like a pretty penny, sounds like a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But Angie Henry, the CFO, brought up a great point that one HVAC system to fully overhaul it costs $1 million. Just one HVAC system.
4.5.
$4.5 million.
So $2 billion when we're talking about an overhaul of an entire school.
I guess that's a
district.
real question. How are you going to pay for this? The $2 billion that is not going to fall out of the sky. Where are you going to get this money from?
So I think the county commissioners are looking at different options.
I did see the $1 billion school bond referendum that Skip Alston wanted to put on the ballot. So does that cover the county commissioners' half that they had agreed to pay for this?
So the county commissioners are responsible for the entire price tag.
The entire price tag?
In the state of North Carolina, the county commissioners are the ones who are
going to put it on the taxpayer.
Well, that's what they're looking at, different options. They're looking at doing it over a period of time so that it has a reduced impact on the taxpayer. They're also considering sales tax referendum to help fund this.